We're joined by Horacio Falcao, an INSEAD Professor. You've brought out a new book called Value Negotiation. Let's get down to value claiming, value creation. In your book, you say that every move in value negotiation is an attempt to make power irrelevant and create value. What do you mean?
What we are trying to recommend is, instead of just focusing on power so much, try to make power irrelevant. Of course, it will be there, but make it so that the negotiation produces so much value because you're making a straight line towards it, that every focus you have is going towards building more value, that you don't have to worry about power. The other person doesn't have to feel like they have to be afraid and defend themselves and therefore build an arms race against you. And instead of wasting all of this energy and resources on all of those, we can now invest in creating more value. So that's the principle.
And by power, you're talking about power distance and reducing the power distance?
That's pretty much it. Of course, power can come in many forms, but that will be probably the most important element of it all. When people go into a negotiation, many times they try to see how much power do I have. Many people fail to perceive that how much power I have can actually be irrelevant if the other person has more power. And that brings the element of what you mentioned, the power distance.
Well, how can we best create value and then capture it, or as you put it, claim value?
On the value creation, many people think that they need to be super creative. Yeah, the word creation actually hints towards that. Let me actually try to break it down. You don't need to be super creative. Creativity helps a little bit, but not as much as people think. Actually, I break value creation as a phase in the process into two: value discovery and value generation. The value discovery is literally the exercise of bringing everything you want and they want to the table, all the resources you can and they can put into the negotiation. And the more we do this, the more raw material we have to work with. Once we understand the raw material and the questions that we have to answer, the questions become actually pretty obvious or straightforward, and more often than not. Many times what happens is that people come with just one or two of what they want, and they forget that there's a multitude behind it. They only think about one or two main resources, which are the most obvious, and they forget that there are other ways of doing things, and therefore they lock themselves in a situation where, of course, creativity is almost impossible. The example I normally give in class is, imagine I give you a number 2 pencil, and I ask you to paint me the Mona Lisa. You might be able to draw it, but you can't paint it. So that's the first distinction in value creation. The second problem is that complexity may become an issue. So we see complexity in many instances in negotiation, and the value negotiation process is one that tries to simplify that complexity in a way that doesn't make it dumb, right? We're not trying to cut corners, but we're trying to understand the complexity of the world in a way that makes sense to us and allow us to react and decide proactively at different times. So that's the second part, is the managing the complexity. And the third element in value creation is trying to prevent the enemies of value creation from jumping into the process. And there are basically two kinds of enemies of value creation. The first one internal, the second one external.
Well, in terms of value capture and value claiming, then, what are the odds on you being able to pull it off effectively in terms of being able to get what you want out of the negotiations?
To create an environment of value creation that allows you to enlarge the pie, as the popular expression goes, so that you can then claim your fair share of what was created, the odds are very good if you have the skill, if you have the experience, if you practice. In my experience, that people who are decently good, they don't have to be masters, but they are decently good in any win-win process. They tend to create value more often than not. And the times that they don't, was it because they failed to do so? Was it because the negotiation was harder? Tough to say. Some people would argue, oh, it's because the negotiation, there was no room for value creation. But the idea, I think, is that the odds are very good if you did the basic preparation, not just for that transaction, but as a negotiator, to go through the motions and a process that will allow you to do so.
But value capture is the key, right? I mean, rather than numbers or whatever, it comes down to getting some value out of the talks.
Sure. So value capture, value claiming, interchangeable terms. Some people call it the distributive part of a negotiation as well, more technically speaking. I like value claiming. I think it's simple. I'm trying to get my fair share of it. Is that key? Well, if there's nothing to be claimed, there's not much you can do. If they have a lot of power, there's not much you can do. So if we think in terms of bargaining, yes, as I said before, value claiming is all. When you come into a value negotiation or a win-win negotiation approach, value claiming is also important, the also being the key word. Of course, if I create a lot of value and I don't take any of it home, I failed. The value claiming for me then is very important because a lot of people who go into the win-win, they get so excited with the idea of value creation that they tend to forget the value claiming. And most of the other theories of value creation out there, of win-win negotiation out there, they do tend to fail. Fail is a strong word, but they tend to fall short of giving very good solutions to how to claim value sustainably, even when you're facing a win-lose person on the other side. So in the sense that value claiming is important, we believe that we should be, as I try to convey throughout the book, positive but not naive. We should always be positive to try to seek something that is our fair share. As soon as we try to extract more than what our fair share would be, that of course will generate resistance. People will try to see this as try to take advantage of the process, potential power move, they will resist, and we're going to go into a battle. So all that exercise that we had before to build a good value negotiation process can be thrown away in a split second. And so I actually believe that value claiming is extremely important because it's the most dangerous moment of a negotiation from my perspective, because it is so close to bargaining. It's so similar to a win-lose process that if you don't have some key principles in mind, it becomes very easy and tempting to just go back to our default approach that for years we used, which is the normal bargaining back and forth.
And how important is this notion of fairness within talks, that you feel as though you have got your fair share out of it?
Yeah, for a win-win approach is fundamental. In a bargaining approach, once again, a win-lose approach, because there's power, people usually throw fairness out of the window. I don't care. I have the power, law of the jungle, I get it, right? Usually, unfortunately, ethics goes through the window as well with that, right? Because it's all about power. In a win-win scenario, because the goal is to keep power at bay, because our goal is to minimize or eliminate resistance so that we can maximize value, if when I go to the value claiming, suddenly I start being unfair, of course you will start resisting, and you might even become unfair yourself. Boom, we're back into a power battle. So to avoid that from happening at such a delicate moment, being fair is the best message that I can send to the other side is, I still value you, I still respect you as someone who deserves value. We're having here a genuine misunderstanding or trying to find an understanding of what will be my fair share and yours. And we will disagree. Many times we will disagree because fairness is different things to different people. Not only that, my perception of what I've done or contributed might be very different from yours. Plus, even if you had the same perception of what I contributed, you might value it differently.
Well, in another part of this interview, we'll come back to the idea of the notion of ethics and negotiations. But for now, Horacio Falcao, thanks for joining us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.